Welcome to Creative. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and this show is located at the nexus of creativity and technology. Each episode, I sit down with creatives of all kinds, artists, writers, musicians, designers, directors, you name it, to explore how artificial intelligence is shaping their creative process. How did they get started using AI tools? Where are they now in that relationship? And what do they really think about AI and creation? Let's dive in. In this conversation, I speak with Inti Macdonald, a recent graduate in industrial design, about the evolving landscape of design tools, particularly the integration of AI in creative processes. Inti shares his journey from traditional craftsmanship to embracing digital tools, highlighting the importance of user empathy and foundational skills. We discuss the emotional impact of AI-generated content, the potential of spatial computing, and the responsibility of creators to navigate the balance between creation and destruction in a rapidly changing world. Hope you enjoyed listening to this fascinating young creative as much as I enjoyed talking with him. All right, so I am on here with Inti Macdonald, and he is someone that I was fascinated to meet, in part because doing this show, talking to people who are at different experience levels, different points in their lives. It is fascinating to talk to people at the end of their career, the beginning of the career, midway, as people are adjusting to this new world we're entering into with artificial intelligence affecting and impacting the act of creation. And so, well, first of all, just welcome aboard, Inti, and tell us a little bit about you, your education and training, and a little bit about, because since we talked before, about industrial design, what that means, and what do you do with that?
Yeah, so my name is Inti Macdonald, and I'm a recent graduate of Western Washington's Industrial Design program up in Bellingham. So as a young designer in industrial design, roughly what that means is helping bring products to market through user empathy and market research and just creative problem solving, exploring the idea space and finding solutions to problems that are specific to the user of choice in a given market or product category, I should say.
So it's interesting. You use that phrase, user empathy, right? That sounds very human to me. Right? That being able to imagine how someone else would approach something, use something, interact with something, and yet there is you on one end, and then there is the user on the other end, but there are these tools in between. So in your education and training, you got introduced to these tools, embraced these tools, maybe found some for yourself. Tell us a little bit about that part of the process, because we've all used tools. We've all had things handed to us. If we're a filmmaker, someone put a camera in our hands when we were young, or, someone like me doing screenwriting, final draft, and suddenly, the formatting of screenplays, I don't have to think about that anymore. I can just tell a story. So you had tools, and those tools are evolving. And so I'm kind of really curious, as I'm intending to do with the audience who's listening. You started with some tools, and now the tools are changing, right? They're evolving, they're becoming more powerful. So walk us through that a little bit about the use of those tools, what they've empowered you to do, and how you feel about them.
Yeah, so just some backstory in the broad spectrum of tools under my belt so far. I grew up with two parents who are artists and jewelers. So I was in the studio at a young age, exploring all these creative processes and doing a lot of physical tool learning. And then going into industrial design, when I did, it has become very digital. A lot of the tools we learn these days are, revolve around the computer. And so that was my time to really dive into this non-physical space and these tools, which are also equally as important, especially in combination. So yeah, and then as of very recently, the AI tools, specifically, for this conversation, the The first thing that I was exposed to, that I'm sure a lot of people have been exposed to now, is image generation through AI. And it's kind of old news now, even though it's only been a couple of years. But yeah, just being able to do a text prompt and get an image. And so that was pretty exciting as someone who's creating visuals, visual storytelling, and trying to just learning through school how to take an idea in my mind and actualize it in any way, sketching, rendering, all of these things. So yeah, Midjourney and DALL-E were some of the first programs that I messed around with. If I was at the beginning of a project, even before maybe I had sketched, I just had the words, to describe an idea I threw it into the AI as a prompt and just messing around, experimenting with what the output was. And that was, it was cool and fun, but there wasn't quite enough utility for me as an industrial designer at the time. But since then, there's been some really exciting tools that have emerged that are very quickly finding its way into a lot of designers' workflows. So some examples of that would be, I've been using Runway, which one feature of Runway, they kind of have a whole suite of AI tools, but the one that I've been really getting into is image to video generation. So I've taken projects that I've already created and done computer renderings of a product, and then quickly put it back into the AI with a text prompt and gotten motion to something that was originally just an image. And that really wowed me, because things like, I have a person standing in the snow with this outfit that I designed, and in 30 seconds I can have snow falling, and I can have this person reaching up and adjusting their hood, and it really does evoke emotion seeing that. And if I were to try to simulate snow, that would be a whole maybe week-long process. I don't know how to do that yet, so I would go into learning these tools and simulating this, and it's extremely compute heavy. And so yeah, just being able to add motion to a thing makes it feel, it's bringing it a little closer to real life, and really just helping tell a compelling story. So that's really cool.
You hit on so many things I want to follow up on. I'll start with, back at the beginning, having artists for parents, jewelers. And so you have this grounding in tactile objects. And so when you were creating and playing around then, were you sketching? Were you just making? Were you, sort of learning a process and building out that way? Because I'm always fascinated with, the ability to use these tools is built upon something that is grounded in a foundation of sort of underlying artistic skill, where it's not that you're just typing words into a prompt. You've developed an eye. You've been playing with real world materials. So yeah, tell me about that learning process that gave you your grounding.
Yeah, I owe it all to my parents, exposing me to as many different creative mediums as possible, clay and sketching and drawing, of course. And as I got a little older and really curious about jewelry, in particular metalworking and lapidary, like cutting stones. And yeah, I think it's super necessary to understand these foundational skills, foundational mediums, to then take this tool that's so powerful but also so easy that, to use it in a way that is extending your ability rather than replacing all these other things. And in some use cases it will replace it slowly, and that's okay too, but yeah, understanding where it came from is really important.
In looking over your website, your portfolio, you continue to make jewelry, correct?
Yes.
But now you're using these tools to help you with that. And how about your parents? Did they use these tools as well, or do they stay old school?
Well, so, they're pretty old school, of course, but something that I'm a recent pursuit that I want to help my parents with is, after having gone through school and learning these tools, is implementing them into their workflows, to just ease that repetitiveness, there's the beauty of creating that meets making money, and at some point it becomes, or it can become, a task, and there's a little bit of the wonder that is lost. And not in every aspect, but sometimes you have to make multiple of a thing to make money. And it's really most gratifying, I think, when you're creating new things always and exploring that curiosity. So an example of that, and it's that I really want to do, my dad carves out of wax to cast into silver and gold. And, you're carving at such a small scale, and it's kind of backbreaking work. I mean, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, but, it's really small because that's the end scale. But an idea I had for that would be, with photo scanning or LiDAR, you could sculpt at a much larger scale and something that feels a lot more natural, and then scan it and downscale it and then print it and cast it. And so, I think there's some ways that we can integrate tech and AI that really helps us and makes frees us up to make more and to make in a way that, is good, not too hard on the body, on the eyes, and all of that. So
that's fascinating. I hadn't thought about that, but that's really cool. I'm also interested because one of the people I just talked to is helping revamp USC's game design program and integrating tools into the teaching flow and in the project creation flow. And so I'm interested, when you were learning, how do you think, how did it go? You were being introduced to these tools in part by the people who were teaching you. Did you get a sense for how, were they embracing it fully? Were they reluctant at all? Because one of the things I like to explore in these conversations is just how people are, whether we're on the exponential curve or otherwise, these things are developing and people have different feelings about them. And you clearly have embraced them, but you were taught by people who might have had different feelings. I'm kind of curious what that was like.
Yeah, I mean, I think that AI, specifically in the creative field, there is most certainly this, it's a touchy subject and pretty strong, polarizing just opinions, because you see something that's made in seconds that, can be built off of work that, someone's work that isn't necessarily giving the okay to, use that as training data. And so I think that that's all, that needs to be navigated and those artists be credited properly. Mostly, I mean, from the people that I've been surrounded by, who have been learning these tools and pioneering them, they've been really positive, responses. Like, they see the utility, and it's a no-brainer to use these tools. But it's definitely using them in a tasteful way. I think that there is a unprofessional way of, again, because it's so easy, because anyone can use these tools, you can just make an image, but there is no substance really to that image now, or there's less substance to just an image. It's how you use it. I don't know if that answers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What struck me is that, and this is a refrain that I'm hearing, that there is, for people who are, truly creators and makers, they see the power of these tools, of AI in general, and are forming a relationship with the tools in that, and trying to put them in their sort of proper role in the creative and iterative process, where they may be more powerful tools than ones that you've used before, but that you have to find this place of harmony between you and the tools so that your creative intuition and that spark of humanity that fuels so much of creation is at the heart of whatever comes out the other side of the process. Another artist that I spoke with, he talked about, he makes sketches and he'll put it into and have AI play around and iterate, and then he'll look them over and okay, these have some interesting elements to it, and I'll pull these out and I'm going to do some more sketching, and then I'm going to feed it back in. And by the end, the piece of art that he makes is only he could have done it. It has a distinct vibe, feel, tone that is all his. But this AI, the tools have been a part of that creative process, but it couldn't have begun or ended without him. And so it's about establishing that relationship where it's I'm not just typing in a prompt, I'm creating.
Yeah.
And you touched on something, again, that was fascinating to me, that idea of when you were making jewelry, and I'm sure it factors into the stuff you do now, there's this sense of creative play, iteration, seeing what's possible, new tools, new possibilities. And when you were talking about that, it just struck me as very much like Steve Jobs at Apple, where he talked a lot about pulling in elements from all different disciplines, that you didn't know what would inspire you, but you had to play around, free your mind, and make connections that you might not otherwise make. And that using tools like, whether it's Midjourney, DALL-E, or anything of the sort, where it might open your mind to possibilities that you hadn't been thinking of, but you see the utility of them, you see the possibilities, and then it helps you on that next step. But the journey couldn't have begun without you, but that it still contributes to this sense of like, oh, I hadn't thought of it quite that way. I have that feeling when I work on a story or whatever, like working on video games. One of the banes of the existence in the video game world are the barks, these lines that characters will say as you're walking, you're riding a horse in a medieval town and going through the streets, and people are saying stuff near you, or someone on a side quest is like, "You on the horse, come here." And people just say random lines, and you have to create thousands of them. It's like, okay. And AI can spit out stuff and you're like, oh my God, about 73% of this would never show up anywhere. But then you read a few lines and you're like, I hadn't thought of that someone might talk about how beautiful your horse's mane is. Like, I hadn't really thought of that, but I might have gotten there. But possibilities are put in front of you, and then you take those possibilities somewhere else.
I like that. Yeah, so that makes me think, it reminds me of another example. The other thing I'm sure a lot of people now have used, obviously, is ChatGPT, and there's many use cases. And early on, when I'm doing research for a project and really just trying to aggregate information and kind of bounce ideas off of, it reminds me of, just when you have a conversation with a person close to you, sometimes they give you a really thought-provoking idea. And also sometimes just the act of verbalizing your idea, you find something, it unfolds in your own mind. And so I've had examples of trying to learn a tool and getting stuck and trying to resort to ChatGPT and running through my problem and honestly having unsatisfactory answers, but the process of doing that was really helpful. And also it just makes me think of where it's at now, but where it really could go. I think that when we can have these AI collaborators and kind of sidekicks or, personal assistants that can start to really understand you and your intent, I think that's where it will get really powerful, to have this ongoing conversation. And it's constantly adjusting and building that model of who you are and what you want to create, so that it can provide meaningful reminders of information, or it could scour the internet while you're asleep and present with you a cool finding that you wake up and it reinvigorates your creative process or something like that. So that's really cool. I think that's near future for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially we're entering the agentic age, and certainly there are some tools out there now. Another person that I spoke to was talking about, actually it's the USC professor, talking about using Laura, where he can feed his artwork, his entire body of, he has been in the industry for 4 to 5 decades. And it can learn what it is to create a piece of his art, what his styles are, how it has evolved over time. And he can create new original art based on his style, his approach, the subjects he tends to tackle. And it's a sidekick, like you said, but it is capable of learning you and, as you said, intent. And that's a very human word, intent, right? But we are in that near future, in that just since we spoke last, multiple tools have come out. The latest ChatGPT came out, and I don't know if you've heard of it. I'm going to butcher the name, but it's like Humanity's Last Test or Humanity's Last Assessment. It's a benchmark for AI where it has 3,000 multiple choice questions on all the different areas of knowledge for humanity, very complex, very difficult to answer questions. And as of like ChatGPT, well, I don't know which one it was, 4, it was getting like an 8.6% on this assessment.
Wow.
And then 3.0 came out, the reasoning model, it jumped up to, I want to say, 13%. And the latest model, you talked about research. They just released a tool that involves deep research. It is getting 26.6%. And so we're talking in the span of a year, it's gone from 6 to 8 to 13 to 26, like its ability to catch up and understand intent, to be able to give you the information that will help you specifically, that it can learn what your goals are and try to help with them. Visually, written, doesn't matter. That's how fast things are going. It's powerful. And you said another thing that fascinates me, because you're right. When you talk about creating like snow and trying to, like, that would have taken a lot of time, effort. I mean, one of the refrains of my conversations, things are about speed, efficiency, cost. All of these things, burdens are lightened with the use of these tools. You talked specifically about the invoking of emotion. And that is central to what I'm trying to explore with this podcast, that at what point can the artificial intelligence so replicate our emotional terrain that it could make us cry, that it could evoke a sense of emotion that we feel until now that only another person could get us to feel. And, it's the kind of thing, like, you watch a movie in the editing process and someone hasn't added the music yet, and you're like, okay, that's interesting, and then the music gets added and you're like, oh my god, I'm feeling this at a whole new level. Or you hear the music first and then someone adds these powerful visuals and you're like, okay, now I'm being taken to a different place. And we've always told ourselves that is the human creation on the other side of that is reaching through, using this as a mode of expression to make us feel something. But you're talking about having used an AI tool, and suddenly we get snow, we get wind, we get, something that we didn't have before, and it makes you feel something. Have you had any moments in there where you're like, this is very powerful, not just like in the sense of like a powerful computer, but just powerful on an emotional and psychological level?
Yeah, so for me, in this recent exploration of the image to video generation and specifically product design, something that I've been finding and others have been finding is kind of contradictory to the original problem of AI with, hands and details of humans replicating those small details that breaks that. It gives you the uncanny valley effect. With product design, something that is interesting is when you try to create, let's say, a mesh pattern or just something very structured, there seems to be a kind of imperfection, almost a dreamlike or memory-like imperfection of structured lines of things. But when I input renderings that involve humans or snow or clouds, it's actually really good at that because of this organic, fleeting aspect of those subjects. And so oftentimes I'm a bit frustrated with how it kind of doesn't fully respect the structure of the product that I'm trying to visualize. And as the camera pans around, you don't have that information, so it creates new information. But it's actually surprisingly good at, the human body. I had one example where there were no hands. It was a shot of pants, a still shot, and it brought the legs to life and also added hands moving, with the gait cycle. And that was really exciting. It was this discovery of a quality of this thing that I didn't know it was capable of doing in a way that would be satisfactory. So that's really cool.
And part of my reaction to that is there's this quality, and you probably have experienced it when you use these tools, that they want to please you. They want to give you the answer you're looking for. Sometimes that might create hallucinations, but I have this feeling that AI has gotten a lot of feedback over time saying, like, why do you keep giving me 7 fingers? Why aren't people walking like normal human beings? And like, it's gone out to like scrape everything so it can learn what it means to move hands through space and what it looks like to walk so that it looks more real, and taken all of that feedback, negative or otherwise, to address the issue. Because you're right, it's come so far in such a short amount of time where you get these gee whiz moments like, okay, people told me that the fingers were the dead giveaway, but they're not anymore. What are the dead giveaways? And one of the things I've discovered, and you touched on this, is imperfection. In that so many images that you can get, they are glossy, they are smooth, they are perfect. In that, and I always think about Star Wars when I think about this. Why? Because one of the things that set it apart, if you go back and look at science fiction and stuff that was being made before Star Wars came out, it was very polished and gleaming, like it was the future, right? And then Star Wars made it look lived in. Made it look like you go into a house and, you know, it's like pockmarked and whatnot, dirty, and you have bounty hunters who are just all, you know, hairs every which way. Like, it felt lived in, it felt real. And there's something about imperfection. One of the artists I spoke to talked about that. It's like, I get these images and then I have to go in and dirty it up. I need to add some flaws, because flaws are what make things real. You know, the perfection is in the imperfection, and which I always find fascinating. Not to go on another ramble, but there's this fantastic short story by, I believe it's Isaac Asimov, where a reporter is going to, there's this galactic get-together that happens once a year, where this artist creates this transcendent laser light show, XR, VR, AR, like just extravaganza. Thousands, millions come together to view it. And it's a unique show every year. And the reporter is there to talk to the artist, the creator, about, how do you do this? And as he's being brought in, there's a robot butler, brings him in to get him, and I'll go get her, the artist. But the robot has a hitch in how it moves. And the reporter's like, oh, I dabble in a little bit of, robotics myself. Come over here and I'll tweak that for you so you don't have to move like that anymore. And he fixes it, and the robot's like, hey, thanks. That's fantastic. Wonderful. Goes and gets the artist. She sits down, and they start talking about her process. And then the robot butler is like, can I get you anything? And she notices the hitch is gone. She's like, what happened? Where'd the hitch go? And he's like, oh, he fixed it for me. Isn't it great? And she screams and she collapses on the floor and she says, you have no idea what you have done. I don't create these transcendent shows. He does. That imperfection that he walks with, that he moves with, from that comes this amazing, perfect, artistic expression, and now you've destroyed it. The underlying lesson being that, again, perfection, beauty, art comes not from perfecting everything around us. It comes from our flaws. So, sorry to derail with that, but
it's so wonderful. That is just a really great story, and it totally highlights just the importance of the human in the creative process. I think that there will be some uses of AI. I almost picture the uber corporate application of AI, like some commercials or something where there's creativity involved, but the end goal maybe is just to sell a product or maximize viewership, and there's a human involved trying to figure all these things out, how to do that in the best way. And maybe that will be, in that use case, creativity will be replaced by AI, to make visuals and to, graphic design, videos, whatever, in a very brute force method. But I think this will also elevate creatives and just kind of emphasize the importance of that imperfection. It's okay. For the longest time, it's like the movement of painters going from realism to abstractism, because at a point, you reach that, you can't get better perfection, and it becomes boring because it's so saturated. The embracing of the flow and the imperfection of things is really an interesting
Yeah,
concept.
well, in talking to both of my children at various points, especially my daughter, who she's 10, and she is skilled for a 10-year-old as an artist, and she's very interested in other artists. And my wife was an art history major and has shown her some work, and she looks at things like Picasso, and she's like, how is that art? Because, to a 10-year-old, realism is where it's at, right? Because they're still working their way towards that. And it's like, no, he could have done realism. And you go back and look at some of his early work, like he was a gifted artist. He got past that. He moved to a new place to see it from a different direction. He wanted to see it from all directions at once, as a matter of fact. And it's fascinating, because it's like, yeah, that's something that unless you prompt an AI to create a surrealistic cubist Picasso style painting, otherwise it's going to give you realism. You need perhaps that human spark to move past that. But to bring it back to you and your work and your art, I know that you've talked about spatial computing and the desire to, because you were talking there about sort of a corporate approach, that your goal to do something perhaps of substance and meaning to you and hopefully to others. So walk us through a little bit about your own artistic process when it comes to your act of creation and how the tools fit into that.
Yeah, so one of the most important digital tools that I picked up during school and has found its way into every project that I work on as a designer is Gravity Sketch, it's a augmented reality, virtual reality design platform. And it's really amazing. It's basically being able to sketch in 3D space and model and collaborate with others. So yeah, just this emergence of the term spatial computing and all the tools that come with it, I'm really, really passionate about. I think that there are, we sit in front of computers right now so much, and there's definitely a detrimental effect that comes, just sedentary lifestyle. But it seems to be this kind of necessary evil, or not evil, it's not, but that's just the term that I use. Mm-hmm. But it's this powerful tool that allows us to do so much, but we kind of have to sacrifice a little bit of our physical selves to be able to, project our consciousness into this thing. But what's really exciting to me about the future of computing platforms is bringing it back into the spatial world. So being able to take the information off of a two-dimensional screen and put it around us. And I'm not a blind advocate for virtual reality everywhere. I think that we also need to really get back in touch with our physical selves. But I think that if you are going to be doing something, interfacing with the digital world, I think that as we develop these new tools, we can do it in a way that is better for our bodies and our minds. So using VR and AR and Gravity Sketch, instead of sitting in front of the computer to model out my product on a traditional CAD software, I'm able to stand up and do it. And then if I get tired, I can even lay horizontal and alleviate the pressure on my neck and back. So just this flexibility with interfacing with technology is really exciting. And then also on the AI side, being able to have these agents that we interact with, and I think that voice interface will allow us to spend less time looking at our phones, which is another ergonomic problem. And an attention problem, driving on the road and all of these things. And so being able to, again, interface with the digital world and information in a way that is more natural to the way that we interface with other people and information in our physical world just is really, really promising.
Well, you can certainly see that there is an allure And even it goes stronger than that, I think, where periodically there has been introduction of VR headsets and then it goes away because they're too heavy or they're not powerful enough. But then you have the Vision Pro and that sort of becoming like the people who love it, saying like this is showing us what's possible. And only a company like Apple that could afford to lose all of that money in the development of it could bring us a tool like that. But you have the Meta Quest and you have there's this drive to liberate us from the physical of the desk of the phone, where the Ray-Bans that Meta has, where they're not powerful enough, but they show you what is possible. And you talked about how, again, like it is physically liberating. Like the first time you put on a headset and then you're moving around through space, it's a totally different dynamic, right? And I know a project that a friend worked on. It was a 3D model. Again, you're looking through a phone, but a screen, but it's projecting onto, it's AR, and it's a Batman game, and Gotham is projected on the table in front of you, and you can get up and walk around it. And not only can you, but you must. Because if you want to follow the Joker and where he's weaving on the streets, if you stay over here, the buildings are in your way. But you move, and then you can see, and it's like, oh, I need to go over here, and I need to do this thing. And when you stop, you realize, wait a minute, I'm walking around and navigating real three-dimensional space, and I'm not sitting on a couch with my PS5 controller. I'm suddenly interacting in a different way. And how interesting and compelling that is. Like, there's a draw. We want to move. We want to be in the world as opposed to viewing it. But one of the things that you touched on there is it's better for our bodies and minds. But one thing we talked about before, which I'd love to get to as we're wrapping up, is it's also better for the world. That the ability to create in this virtual three-dimensional space might have powerful end results that we might not be thinking about or anticipating. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I love this idea. I think that, again, like, it's the technology is not inherently good or evil. And, some people, they see, Facebook or Meta, demo their metaverse and laugh at it because it's silly right now, and it's like, oh, this is so dorky. People are quick to see obviously the shortcomings of these things, but I really like to look at the beauty of what these emerging technologies have to offer. I think about being able to talk to my mom, and voice chat. Imagine if I'm halfway across the world, and if I'm on a walk and she's on a walk, and I can walk next to her and see her face, and the nuances of her facial expressions are conveyed through technology. It shouldn't replace the real thing, but it can give me a really nice supplement when I can't have it. And I think that that's really beautiful. And another example, talking about, what we had said before off air, the idea of what deserves to be physical and what would be better off virtual. Currently as a product designer, we make a lot of things, and I think that we're not going to stop making a lot of things anytime soon, but we will definitely have this virtual space to iterate and validate the things, and hopefully the objects that we do materialize are a little more, or just become more and more thought out, more thoughtful, and then maybe there will be a tapering off and we can clean up a little bit of our physical space. And an example that I've thought about a lot is the human want to explore environments, and I use the example of like going on a safari, like this want to travel to a foreign environment and experience animals as a human body and be there, which it seems inherent to humans. But I think that in some regards that, maybe, I don't know if we should continue to do that forever. You have social media, you have more and more people wanting to go to a place, and then destroying that place because they go there. And I think we should leave some places alone and let them be and have these sanctuaries. And so I like to think of like, a digital safari, or like, we being able to satisfy that urge to explore, to go underwater and to explore coral reefs and learn about them and satisfy that, but to do it in a way that is really low impact, and maybe you don't need to bring this human body there that needs food and that leaves waste and all of these physical byproducts of that pursuit. I think that being able to digitize information and preserve physical spaces is really interesting.
Yeah, it's funny, there's an old video game, one of the first sort of visual point-and-click adventures called Myst. You may have heard of it. And it just takes place on an island. It's got a little bit of QuickTime video in it, but for the most part, it's just these beautiful visual images. Massive, huge seller. And, all of the locations are pristine. And someone released something years later where they're like, just imagine if all of the people who played the game were actually tourists who went to that island, and then they recreated the images and the place is just trashed. There's graffiti everywhere. And it's just like, yeah, that's exactly what would happen. But I love your vision of a world that gets to live on minimally or just unspoiled as best we can, that we can iterate enough and create enough in a three-dimensional artificial reality that is so real that it feeds that part of us. Because like you said, there's this human desire to explore, experience, adventure, have the experience for yourself, but being able to give that to ourselves in a way that preserves reality. And one of the things that we had talked about that I remain fascinated by is this idea that if you can, in that artificial reality, iterate and create with such fidelity that you don't have to do it in the real world, that suddenly you're using less material, you're requiring less of reality. And so our relationship with reality gets renegotiated. We exist in it, we live in it, we move through it, but not everything that we dream up or every version of it, trying to get to the version that we want to keep, they don't have to come into reality with us. And so we get to a place where it is a privilege to be a part of reality, that we get to advocate for, here's the finished thing. Do we bring it into the world with us? Or can it just remain in that virtual space and you can experience it there? Because what do we really need in the world immediately around us, because it's precious and very human. And so to invite something not human, or, and again, as we talked about, the whole creative process of bringing it into reality is helped with these tools of artificial intelligence, that we get to be the final arbiters of what matters to us. So again, I find fascinating.
Yeah, we have a big responsibility, because we seemingly are the species with the most control over destruction and creation currently in our reality. And so we should handle that with care and clean up.
That is a beautiful place to end this, in that life is about this balance, and life is creation and destruction. We perhaps have done a little bit too much on one side, so perhaps we need to work hard to balance the scales a bit, and with our act of creation, clean up some of the destruction, so that those who come after us get to experience this world and the things that we can create in it as we have. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, and again, the fact that you are at the beginning of your journey, as opposed to some of the people I've been talking to where we're midway or heading towards the end or in that last chapter, may that last chapter last forever. But that it's fascinating to speak with you and get your mindset, because you're going to have more time to be shaping our collective destiny than a lot of the people I've been talking to. And I find that the more I talk to creative young people, the more faith I have that we'll head down the better path. So I appreciate your time
Thank you so much
for sharing your creative process with us.
Great talking, Andy.
All right. Be well.
You too.